We live these really incredible lives in a single moment, tiny speck of a moment, and yet we're part of a much bigger story, both in time and space.
We go, up we go. No.
The diversity of our world, the diversity of our human experiences is so broad. And every single time I travel, there's something so profoundly new about the world that it shakes you to your core.
Wow, look at this place.
And that's why I think I love to keep going out into the world and finding those stories of us. My name is Albert Lin, and my travels around the world have taken me far. From the highest heights of Peru to the thickest jungles of Guatemala, Colombia, and beyond.
All this wild jungle was home to a vast civilization.
It hasn't been easy. It was the most scorpion-y place I've ever been. But everywhere I go, I'm determined to uncover the missing pieces that connect these stories of our collective past.
Pottery? Yeah. You serious? Yeah.
And through advanced technology, I can help reveal those ancient worlds, stretching far beyond their known boundaries.
That's crazy.
When I went to Guatemala in 2018, I was working with a group of archaeologists who had been collectively using LiDAR to map a large portion of the Yucatan Peninsula. They identified over 60,000 man-made structures, basically uncovering a modern-day treasure map of the ancient Maya world. It's pretty incredible to realize that you're in a moment that will quite literally change the history books when it comes to the understanding of an entire civilization.
Right underneath us, right here. Our lost worlds, lost cities, lost temples, pyramids. Here we go. We're going in.
The archaeology community down in Guatemala, they've been given this once-in-a-lifetime map that they now have to spend the rest of their life trying to ground truth. And it's no small task. When I joined them, just getting to one of the small sites near the ancient city of El Palmar was quite an adventure. This is the stomping grounds of Guatemalan archaeologist Edwin Roman Ramirez.
Edwin.
Hey!
Good to see you, my
Good
friend.
to see you, friend.
Yeah.
How are you?
Hola.
The team that will help us today.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully this is a day of discoveries.
That will be really fun.
Before the LiDAR map, the archaeologists only knew about the very center of this city, which was punctuated by a massive pyramid.
You see over here, this is one of the largest buildings that we have in this site.
This is a building.
Yeah, imagine this building completely covered by plaster and painted in red.
Wow.
In the beginning, we thought it was only these main buildings, and now LiDAR shows that we are wrong.
Until now, everyone really had no way of knowing the full scale of this ancient city. Tens of thousands of structures were revealed in a single scan. Huge platforms, massive buildings, pyramids, causeways, residential areas, all revealing themselves out of the jungle with the Pakanam LiDAR initiative. It's one thing to see it on the scan, but quite another to find evidence of these structures on the ground in the deep jungle. Really, that's where the fun begins.
Hey, Albert, come on. Look over there. There's a guy in there. Over there. Oh,
It's an anteater. It's so slowly moving along, just hanging out of the trees. And you hear the howler monkeys close by.
If you've ever heard howler monkeys, the first time you hear them, it's terrifying. There's no other way of describing. sounds prehistoric. It sounds like a dinosaur coming to eat you in the jungle. And then finally you spot those howler monkeys hopping through the jungles, and they look kind of cuddly. They're not that scary once you see them.
Now check this out.
The trees were so dense that it made our search nearly impossible. So I applied LiDAR to build an augmented reality platform to help us see through them.
To give us trees and then...
That's amazing.
What we saw was a group of ancient buildings, completely unknown until the LiDAR survey.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, right?
It is. Like I cannot see anything. Wow. Look like that would be maybe two structures right here and one in the back. But I don't know. We have to go and check.
Should just be right through there. So we were just here, right?
Yeah.
But that thing's moving a little bit weird.
Yeah.
I'm using my compass because we're having problems getting any kind of signal through the forest. Now, GPS doesn't always work in the jungle because you need line of sight. And often the trees are so densely enveloping that you can't even get a signal. So sometimes it really is almost like old school dead reckoning. Where are you going? I don't know, I think it's over there.
If we find the... Oh yeah, look, all the rocks here.
Yeah.
This is definitely a creek, right?
Yeah. Over here.
Okay, so we follow the creek. I think we went too far north.
Yeah.
So we need to take the creek back a little bit and look for the rise.
Yeah.
That might be the ridge right there.
Yeah.
The outer edge, yeah.
After a little more bushwhacking, we finally found what we had been looking for.
See? Yes.
Got it!
Yeah, he got it.
Haha!
Fantastic. Good job, man.
Found it!
We found it.
Awesome! Wow, look at this! Oh, man! Look at all these bricks!
These bricks, these artifacts, they were the indisputable proof that Edwin needed.
But you can see how that is square. All of this is part of the structure. How I don't have words to describe it. What I am feeling, I only have happiness. That's everything I can say.
It was an incredible discovery that just kept getting better.
That's up.
Yeah. Look at this.
Oh, look at that.
Evidence proving the ancient Maya once lived and thrived here.
We can confirm that this building is at least 2,000 years old.
You're telling me somebody painted this
Yeah.
piece of ceramic, a human being, over 2,000 years ago?
Yes, I am telling you that.
And we might be the first people to hold it since the time
Yes.
of this.
The more we looked, the more we found.
They just found another building, taller building than this one.
Wow!
That's really tall. That should be maybe that building. Look at this. It's really tall.
It was the first time anyone had ever investigated the site, and it was Edwin's trained eye that identified a whole range of buildings that were old, even by Maya standards. What we found was just a handful of nearly 1,000 previously unknown structures at El Palmar, all waiting to be explored. Starting this whole Maya journey was also a personal one. I had lost my leg in a car accident and didn't know if being an explorer would still be possible. And the first time out in the jungle with a machete and a couple of hiking sticks was a test of, whether or not that could be true. And, you know, with the help of friends and with the support of this community, it was like, okay, well, let's go, because we have the map, we have the moment. It's bigger than your leg. Let's go and see whether or not we can do this. My new body was certainly put to the test. We trekked through thick terrain each day until last light, when the jungle gets really scary. Day by day, the jungle revealed that my leg might have actually been a bonus because I had like half the chance of getting bit by a snake. You know, it's like snake-proof. Look at this. That's a fresh snake skin. Look at that. And then over time, it meant to me leading with the right leg, leading the path so that if anything bit me, that it would bite this carbon fiber, you know, bionicness. I guess, in a lot of ways, the jungle where the Maya once lived was where I regained my footing. After proving that I could make it in Guatemala, I was more determined than ever to keep pushing the boundaries of exploration. That's what led me to Colombia, with LiDAR in hand, and more discoveries to be made. The jungles of Colombia, South America. This is where the legend of El Dorado was born. The Spanish conquistadors, they heard these local tales of a king near here who was covered in gold dust. Over the past 50 years, the whole area was mostly dominated by local drug lords and the FARC guerrillas. But now that archaeologists are beginning to make their way back in, they're finding traces of these unbelievable civilizations, once thought totally lost. Wow!
Audio 10.
Maybe those Spanish stories weren't just legends, because that's what a real lost city looks like.
Setting 1012.
That's Ciudad Perdida, the lost city.
Ciudad Perdida as an archaeological site has not been known about for all that long. It's been the subject of intrepid exploration by just a handful of archaeologists. It's a place that is incredibly remote, incredibly difficult to get to. A factor that has yet to deter one of the toughest archaeologists that I've ever met, Santiago Geraldo, who has been excavating here for 20 years.
It's a beautiful place.
It's amazing this place is still standing. Who discovered it?
It was guaqueros, looters. And then the archaeologists came in, took them about a week to get here, and they were led by other looters.
Looters led the way, huh?
Yeah, it's actually pretty incredible because they got into a shotgun fight. The looters were after the gold that's in the burials. And one looter came out with, you know, more than 80 pieces of gold from one burial. Yeah.
This place, Ciudad Perdida, was built around 600 AD by a people called the Tairona, who were incredible engineers. There's a network of terraces that are connected by these intricate stone pathways built so that if you knew how to use them, you could move between platforms incredibly quickly. But if you didn't know where they were, and if you were trying to attack that region, you would be left to the perils of an incredibly steep, slippery, rocky, and dangerous mountainside.
How many people would have lived here?
About 2,000 to 3,000 at its peak. And then about 10,000 people living in the upper part of the basin.
10,000?
Yeah, all that forest that you see would have been all farmland.
Oh, man, you could almost feel their energy here, you know, like all these people running around.
This coastal mountain range is an ecosystem of intense rain. We're talking 4 meters of rain every year. I don't think I've ever experienced that much rain really anywhere else in the world. It is a place that was designed not as a series of individual homes, but as a larger system, a network of irrigation channels that's pushing water away so effectively that even today, those platforms remain completely intact. They haven't been eroded away. Pretty much everything we know about the Tairona comes from the accounts of Spanish invaders from the 16th century.
There's this Spanish friar, and he describes the Tairona in this way. They had feathered ornaments worn on top of huge plaques of polished gold. There was no Indian male or female that would not have sets of jewelry containing ear ornaments, necklaces, nose rings, and crowns, all of them made in gold.
It was those first encounters with the gold-laden Tairona that may have sparked the myth of El Dorado. But it wasn't just a myth. The Tairona were, in fact, material scientists of the ancient world. They were able to gold-plate materials so that they could, in a way, create artifacts that were, or ornaments that were paying tribute to the spirits of the mountain, to the land itself. Many of the incredible artifacts that were found are under lock and key in Bogota, at a place called the Banco de la República Gold Museum.
Look at all this.
I met with Dr. Juanita San Samper, who is an expert in Tairona jewelry.
This is Tairona gold.
Yes, this Tairona gold work.
They're so detailed.
These are a pair of earrings. They were used just like these.
How do I look? Does it look good on me?
Yes, it looks very nice.
It's pretty big. This is so intricate. Look at that.
Well, this is a great pendant. Let me show you in the microscope. And here you can see the details.
It's amazing. They're tiny little feet holding on upside down.
Yes.
It's so cool.
But also these,
Wow.
these in here, some tiny little birds.
Is this pure gold?
No, it's not pure. It's an alloy made out of gold, copper, and silver. These are gilded pieces.
So how thin is the gold layer on the exterior?
Well, I can show you in here. This like a sandy or porous layer in here. It measures 5.8 microns.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible.
They melted together gold, copper, silver into an alloy that they would then burn over an open flame. Then the next step is to dip that piece into an acid solution that we know they made from a local herb. The chemical process forced gold compounds right to the surface, creating the gilded exterior that we see today. As a material scientist, it just boggles the mind that they were able to come up with something that advanced, way high up in that really intense jungle, and develop these little images which survive till today. The prospect of gold fueled the Spaniards' fantasies, and they planned to find it at any cost. When the Spanish came searching for gold and descended upon Ciudad Perdida, they would embed a memory in the people who lived there. According to the Kogi people who claimed to be descendants of the Tairona, the impact was devastating. There was a Kogi priest that I was able to speak to, and he was telling me about their relationship to the earth and the spirits of nature that were overseeing these landscapes.
Do you think that they lived in a similar way to how you live today?
Como igual, como lo mismo. Lo antes Tairona lo come, entonces después nosotros también como igual así.
It seems like for many years, from the time of the story of El Dorado till now, there's been a lot of people who have come here in search of gold.
Ellos lo sacamos. Todo llevamos. Entonces está secando agua, está secando palo. Está secando el cultivo.
Because people took gold from the mountains.
They've been fighting throughout their existence in order to maintain and exist as a culture amongst a world global culture that cares about materials in a very different way. They're still telling that same story, trying to get people to understand that the resources of that land are not to be exploited, but rather to be respected. I got Jose Maria's blessing, and I was able to scan the Kogi huts. With augmented reality, I was able to see how Ciudad Perdida may have looked 400 years ago. I knew there could be more Tairona cities hiding out there in the jungle, and my goal was to find them. The valley is really huge, and it's also incredibly steep. So we mounted on the front of a helicopter LiDAR scanners that were pointed in 3 different directions, down, to the sides, and we were able to basically shoot millions and millions and millions of laser points across the entire hillside, hoping that some parts of that scan would make it all the way through the canopy down to the jungle floor. I grew up watching movies about explorers, about the jungles, about the mountains, and you romanticize these ideas, right? The truth is, there are snakes, there are scorpions, there are deadly insects, there are things that are trying to kill you out there. That was the most scorpion-y place I've ever been. In fact, at one point we found a whole pile of them, and they were put into a water bottle so we could truly understand how many scorpions were all around us. But you just gotta push past it all. And you gotta realize that you're there for the quest of science. Once we gathered all the LiDAR data, Santiago was able to really see the entirety of the ancient civilization he had been studying for so long.
So that's Ciudad Perdida here?
Yeah, this is Ciudad Perdida. Everything that you see in white, that's flat. That's what we're looking for.
That's the signature of...
Yeah, because white means flat, flat means humans, and that means terracing. So what we're looking for is white. I want to see more. See if we can find some new areas. Oh, look, this is new. This is absolutely new. See that? It's nice and flat. Highly probable that there's terraces right there. We've never been there.
So you're telling me that this area up here could be an entirely new city or site?
It could be a new site. It could be a new town. This is fantastic data, but we need to ground truth them. We got to put boots on the ground and head out there and see for ourselves whether there's terracing, walls, and man-made structures.
We didn't know what we were gonna find in the LiDAR data. We never really do. But we didn't realize how hard it was gonna be to actually go out and ground truth any of those sites. We're not talking about a flat jungle here. We're talking about one of the steepest mountain ranges I've ever really been on. Covered in slippery moss, covered in jungle, covered in deadly snakes, all those other things. And at the same time, in order to travel through it, we needed to be accompanied by a troop of Colombian military guards carrying fully automatic rifles. By the time it came for us to actually think about ground truthing, a lot of the crew had already gotten hurt. Our sound recordist had already popped a few ribs out of his rib cage, falling down the side of this mountain. At one point, I remember another person on the crew having actually gotten within a foot or two of stepping on a Fairland snake, a snake that has embedded itself into my worst nightmares as being one of the deadliest snakes in the world. And we knew that we were so remote that any rescue would be a few days away, because with the fog layers, helicopters can't come in unless there's a clearing, right? They have to be able to see where they're flying. So it really did come down to a level of risk that I don't think anybody had anticipated.
You okay?
I gotta say that expedition was not an easy one. We decided that it had to be a personal choice. So we all took these little slips of paper and anonymously wrote, go or no go, and put it into a hat. If everybody said they wanted to go, we were gonna find a way to go. And if people said they didn't want to go, then we would call off the expedition because of how dangerous it was. And one by one, every single one of those little slips of paper said, yes, go, go, go. And I remember feeling more inspired in that moment than maybe any other moment in my career, to see a whole team of people all saying that they wanted to risk everything to try to go and learn more about our shared collective story.
You see anything?
Not yet. Come on. We go, up we go.
We're at 3,893 feet.
So we're aiming for what?
Yeah, just over 4,000. We gotta be getting close.
Okay. Come on, let's go.
We made our way all the way up to the top of this plateau, and at one point, it just looked like a plateau. What did we go there for? But we felt like there could be something there. You could see that there was some change in the landscape. At that point, the real search began. If this really was a Tairona terrace, then broken pottery or cut stones would have been left behind. So we spread out and checked every inch of ground. Even the army joined in.
Ayuden a mirar si hay piedras, si hay algo de cerámica por ahí.
Maybe around the edges.
Yeah, probably around the edges. I mean, we need to spread out and see if we can find some walls.
Watch out.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch out for snakes.
Ojo con las culebras.
It got so exciting that I remember at one point I completely forgot about all the scorpions and snakes and everything, and Santiago had to be like, hey man, you know, watch out.
I see a rock right here. Yeah, following it. Let's see if we can see it on the other side of this tree.
You see it over there?
Yeah, it continues over here.
Yeah, we got another one over here.
You got another one?
Yeah, we got another rock over here. I've got pottery.
What?
Yeah.
You serious?
Got pottery, yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Let me see.
It's a really small piece. Can you get some water and clean it up? But yeah, pottery for sure.
Wow, look at that. The tiniest fragment. But it's enough.
That was gonna be fun to excavate. Pottery for sure.
This was once somebody's home.
Yeah. Well,
There's a part of this which is about discovery. And that applies to even the smallest fragment of pottery, right? Why do we look? Why do we care so much about these lost cities? Because they represent stories. Stories of people who once lived there. Stories of people who we as a collective species are related to. That tell us more about who we are, where we came from, what's inside us. What is our human condition? And there's something so unifying about that.
I think we can call that success.
yeah. Pretty good day.
Since that discovery, researchers identified another 6 sites that could be locations of Tairona terraced settlements. Continuing on my journey, I traveled to one of the most iconic terraced worlds of yet another incredible people. A people whose legacy continues to evolve.
Machu Picchu. It's up there with Stonehenge, with the pyramids of Giza. It's an incredible feat of engineering, of design, of imagination.
The ancient Inca carved their city high into the Andes, so it would tower above the sacred valley below. To them, these mountains represented the gods. And Machu Picchu represented the architecture of that power. You can really imagine the things that happened there at Machu Picchu. You also realize that that didn't show up out of nowhere. What led to that moment? What happened in Peru on that expedition was a quest for the ancestor story of the Inca. What happened before Machu Picchu? The Inca may have been one of the most well-known civilizations in Peru, but their empire only ruled for 100 years before the Spanish invaded. For centuries, smaller groups inhabited these hills, and it was these lesser-known people that I was trying to understand. Archaeologist Tom Hardy studies pre-Inca remains, close to the town of Rayayacta, just southeast of Machu Picchu, a town which may still hold the stories passed down from their ancient ancestors.
This is a Quechua village?
Yeah, some of the older generation only speaks Quechua. It was the language of the Inca Empire, really.
So when we hear people speaking, we hear the words of the Inca.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hola.
Local legend told of an ancient site hidden on the hillside. But for those who choose to explore it, there's also a warning.
Mature pata. Sin llama urna. Mature. Ari mature pata. Bastante macho pa allá. Pero que causa siyang ya. Chay macho kuna pa allá kuna. Chay ya hay que ir te queja. Ya está un coraje pues un mal ya está muerto rapunk. Pero mana nya na ay jangko karnen ko kanya pura wisu chagenya. Chay ya banyo chico.
With this warning embedded in the back of our minds, we walk towards the hillside.
Should we go up?
Let's do it.
What's that? Oh, there's a whole skull.
Oh, yeah? Oh, wow, you're right.
Wow.
Looks like a leg bone there, too.
Look at that.
It looked like this person had been buried in a small cave in the rock face.
Oh, this probably would have been based here around 600 to 1,000 years ago.
That means that this grave has been sitting here looking across this view since before the Inca, since before even Machu Picchu existed.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
After we had found this body, one of our porters stops and takes out these coca leaves and starts doing a little bit of a ceremony to pay tribute to that person. And it was in that moment that I realized how much of what we were experiencing was a living culture, was a thriving living culture that was still this thread that existed all the way through the pre-Inca to the Inca till today. This grave offered proof that the hill was certainly used by the pre-Inca, but it was hard to imagine anyone living here.
These spikes are like razor blades. It's a good thing I have an impenetrable metal leg. I have a thorn right in my crotch. I can't move. Oh, look at that one.
Oh,
That was right.
You can't even move. That's not a place you want to get a thorn. That was it for me. Time for technology to take over.
Oh, now, look at that. Now that looks like a structure to me, for sure.
Yeah, it looks like maybe 2 or 3 of these little structures in a row on the ridgeline.
Yeah, right there, right?
Yeah.
It looks like a little neighborhood on the side of a mountain. It's amazing.
After finally spotting a better way up, we returned to the hillside and its intense undergrowth to look for further evidence of anything pre-Inca.
It's a good thing we have machetes this time.
Yeah. Hope they help. Still pretty thick.
So we're right here. We're gonna make our way up the ridge, over to the top, see if we can find any of these anomalies. What are those?
Chulpas. These would have been houses for the dead.
Oh yeah, look at that.
So these are tombs.
Yeah. Check that out. It's a really well-preserved one.
Oh, look at this. Anything in there?
No, most of them are gonna be empty at this point. This one's almost definitely pre-Inca.
This is pre-Inca.
How do you know?
These chulpas, they start in the pre-Inca period around 1000 AD. They built these circular ones, small little spaces.
All these little structures that you find on the hillsides of these different mountains are often pairs, and they're often with doors facing to the peaks. Little stone buildings built to be the homes of the dead.
Death was not the end for people in the Andes.
We got City of the Dead.
Those ones up on the top of the ridge are all Inca. They're all square chulpas.
Why would they build right next to the old chulpas that came from a time before, but not destroy them?
Well, destroying them isn't the point. They're trying to appropriate them. They're making a political statement with this sort of religious practice. They're saying, now our ancestors are here, and they're above yours. We still respect yours, but ours are more important.
So you see this continuous evolution of styles and of ideas, of engineering, of human imagination percolated throughout that mountain, like a timeline of thought. After leaving a city built for the dead, we trekked higher up the mountain to look for evidence of how they might have lived.
Oh, it's my cavallo. Hello. We're headed to that peak at 13,000 feet of elevation.
Wata is more than twice the height of Mount Rushmore.
We're already at 11,600 feet of elevation. We got a ways to go.
Peru is just an unbelievable landscape. Now we're talking about the Andes, so everything up there is already at an altitude, which makes the blood thin and makes breathing so difficult, makes your head hurt. Everything is about altitude management. At about 1,000 feet from the top, we found a distinct and imposing structure. It was not only higher, but older than Machu Picchu. Getting there was brutal. Tom Hardy and I struggled, while Peruvian archaeologist Aranchoque Arce made it just look like a walk in the park.
How could they build in such an intense environment? You have to be born with super lungs.
Well, like I done, when you're born here and you're raised here, it's easier to move around, right?
I think it was easier for me.
The hardest part for him was waiting for us.
Oh, wow.
What it means in the local language, an island.
An island?
Yes.
An island in the sky.
Really is a pretty impressive view from up here, isn't it?
Everything was in relationship to different aspects of the natural landscape around them. And the peaks that rise along the horizon, they're almost like giants. There's a belief system in the Inca, or even in the pre-Inca, that said that they were born out of the stone from the mountains. So when they look back at the mountains, they're not looking at stones, they're looking at their own ancestors. When night fell at Wata, we settled into camp, and we were treated to what felt like a show put on by the gods themselves. When the stars come out and the clouds sort of dissipate and you look up at the cosmic twinkling lights, you feel the intense briskness almost of space itself. That's how high up you are in the mountains. Rising at the crack of dawn in the freezing cold, we prepared for the daunting task of searching this vast landscape for hard evidence that could tell us more about the people who lived at Wata. It was kind of amazing what you could find just looking down.
There's bits of pottery everywhere.
Look at this. It seems to be a snake.
That's not an Inca thing. Probably, what, about 1100 to 1300 AD, somewhere in between there.
Pre-Inca pottery. Incredible. It's just lying here, right in the dirt.
Well, that's why ceramics are so useful for us. They're the plastics of the ancient world. They last forever.
Well, that one fits.
That one fits, there you go. Yeah, I'm guessing that would have been maybe the neck of like a really big vessel, but it's hard to say.
A pre-Inca snake looking back at us. Maybe 1,000 years after it was used.
Picking up one of those little bits of pottery, you're transported back to the hands that held that piece of pottery once before. And that connection all the way back to that other human story again, that I think is what drives me. You know, it's not a tangible, but rather a feeling.
Oh, this looks like one of the circular pits.
Yeah. This is probably an opening, so this could have been an entry point here, and it would have been built up above it.
Look at that right there. What's that? Is that a piece of pottery?
It's of a cooking pot.
It's like the burnt up, banged up metal pot you find in your mom's house, yeah.
You can almost smell it. When do you think it came from?
I think it could be before the Inca.
This is pre-Inca?
This is pre-Inca, yep.
I think it was a house for a family.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So could this be the residential area for this entire site?
This certainly suggests that might be the case for the pre-Inca period.
You could see where people lived, and it was almost like everywhere you stepped, you'd find the echoes of those stories.
Look at that. So this is Inca?
Yes, definitely.
You could literally set up shop anywhere. Why would they build this here, right on top of the prior?
It was a public place, public space. The Inca came and interacted with the pre-Inca.
Well, the Inca would have been hosting people here, bringing in people to make them feel part of the community with food and drink, suggesting this area was an important place for those sorts of events going all the way back to the very beginnings of this site.
I imagine that the people would be sitting around this plaza and maybe a group of people were dancing in the middle.
This would have helped create these community bonds, but also bonds of hierarchy and reciprocity. That in return, we will help you build your empire and operate as people as part of the Inca state.
While there's still so much more to learn, just being able to stand at the intersection of two civilizations made me see this place as they may have.
Well, now that the sun is setting, what do they call the sun?
Inti.
Thank you, Inti, for an incredible day.
It's no wonder that for many of the cultures that may have been born out of these mountains, the story of the Earth, of a living, breathing Earth, is quite literally at the center of their existence.